All right, let's get right into it. We're going to be talking about something that is absolutely 100% crucial if you're serious about backend engineering, and that is testing your ASP.NET Core API controllers. And look, this isn't just about ticking a box for code quality, it's about proving you know how to build stuff that actually works in the real world. So picture this, right? You're in a technical interview, and they ask you, so how do you make sure your API endpoints are reliable? How you answer that one question can instantly tell them whether you're a junior, a mid-level, or a senior dev. It's so much more than just saying, I write tests. And that is the absolute heart of it. When you can lay out a clear, confident strategy for testing your controllers, you're showing a way deeper understanding of the system. It proves you're thinking about the whole request-response dance, which, let's be honest, is exactly what separates basic coding from senior-level architecture. So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why this all matters. Then we'll get into the core targets you need to hit and the 3 big outcomes you always have to test for. After that, we'll cover the tricky parts that trip people up, dig into the key principles and pitfalls, and wrap it all up with how to absolutely nail those interview questions. Okay, so let's kick things off with our blueprint for success, the core testing targets. Before you even think about writing a single line of test code, you gotta know what you're aiming for. These are the absolute non-negotiables. Think of this as your pre-flight checklist for every single endpoint. First, are we sending back the right status code? Your 200s, 400s, 404s. Is the actual data in the response body correct? Does our validation logic actually kick in and reject bad data? How do we handle errors? And finally, is our controller talking to its services the way it's supposed to? This checklist is our foundation. All right, so we've got the blueprint. Now let's see how it works in the real world. We're going to break this down into the 3 essential outcomes, the 3 scenarios that you have to know how to test for every single endpoint you build. No exceptions. First up, the easy one, the happy path. This is the test that proves our controller does what it's supposed to do when everything goes perfectly. It might seem basic, but it's the most fundamental test you'll ever write. And the logic here is just beautifully simple. Your test performs an action, say it calls an endpoint with a valid ID, then you just check 2 things. 1, did I get a 200 OK status code? And 2, is the data I got back exactly what I expected? Simple as that. Okay, so the happy path is covered. But what about when things don't go right? What happens when a user asks for something that just isn't there? A great API handles this with grace. So now we test the not found scenario. Now here's what's so important about this. We are intentionally testing a failure path. The test action is to ask for something with an ID you know is bogus. The expected result? A clean, crisp 404 not found. This proves your error handling is solid and you're not just crashing or sending back some confusing server error. And for our 3rd essential outcome, we're testing the API's defensives. What happens if some client tries to send you junk, missing fields, malformed data? This is where we verify our validation with a bad request test. Here, the whole point is to deliberately send bad data to the endpoint. The crucial part is to then check that the API rejects it with a 400 bad request. This is the only way to prove that your model validation is actually switched on and protecting your system. Okay, we've covered the core 3. If you have those down, you're already doing great. But now we're gonna level up. This next part is about the stuff that often trips developers up. But once you get it, it's a dead giveaway that you're thinking at a senior level. And this right here is a huge gotcha. In a live running application, ASP.NET Core automatically handles model validation for you. It's magic. But in a unit test, that magic doesn't happen. The pipeline isn't running. You have to manually add an error to the controller's model state to simulate a validation failure. Knowing this little detail is a massive tell for an interviewer. The other tricky part is dealing with dependencies. Look, your controller test should never touch a real database. That's a huge no-no. So how do you test it? The answer is mocking. You basically create a fake version of your service, a stunt double, that returns predictable data. This way, you're only testing the controller's logic and not the service or the database behind it. All right, let's put this all together and talk about the philosophy. See, great testing isn't just a set of techniques. It's a mindset. It's a collection of principles. This is how you really start to think and code like a senior engineer. So here are the rules to live by. First, test your code, not the ASP.NET framework. They've already tested their stuff. Second, keep your controllers thin and simple. They should be traffic cops, not factory workers.
Third, always use mocking to isolate your controller. And finally, be thorough. Test for success, test for not found, and test for bad requests. Every time.
And on the flip side, here are the mistakes that just scream, I'm a junior. Letting your controller tests hit a real database, that's a cardinal sin. Forgetting to specifically test your model state validation is another big one. Ignoring the failure cases, that's just lazy. And finally, don't write monster tests that do 10 things at once. Keep them simple and focused. All right, time for the final exam. We've gone through the theory and the practice. Let's boil all this down into some clean, confident answers for the exact questions you're probably going to get in that next interview.
So you're in the hot seat. The interviewer leans forward and asks this classic question. How do you respond? What's the perfect, concise answer? That's it. That's the answer. It's clean, it's accurate, and it proves you understand the fundamental principle of unit testing. You're isolating the unit, which is the controller, to check its own behavior without any outside noise. It's a perfect senior-level response. Okay, let's wrap this all up. If you had to boil down the entire purpose of API controller testing into one single powerful sentence, what would it be? This right here is your one-line gold answer. It covers the 3 pillars we've been talking about this whole time: getting the right responses, handling validation correctly, and interacting properly with dependencies. Seriously, memorize this sentence. It's the ultimate summary. And with that, we're at the end. I'm just going to leave you with one final thought. With this playbook in your back pocket, the next time you sit down to write a new controller, what's the very first failure case you're going to write a test for? Because thinking about what can go wrong before you even think about success, well, that's the mark of a truly great engineer.